survivors that would resonate realistically and thereby complete our horrifically rendered vision of the zombie apocalypse which you, the player, now find yourself in.
To find a coherent visual look for Left 4 Dead, we first had to make choices that would help enhance gameplay in a very dark setting. The darkness is crucial to Left 4 Dead, as it forces players to stick together and encourages cooperative gameplay. We took advantage of lessons learned from our previous work on Team Fortress 2, particularly in regard to maintaining the readability of character silhouettes in a dark, chaotic environment. Meanwhile, we studied film techniques that have been employed successfully in dark settings to address the unique challenges and opportunities in a highly dynamic game environment. To accentuate the notion that you're playing through the ultimate zombie movie with a band of your friends, we added various filmic effects to the source engine. Using these effects, including color correction, film grain, contrast, and vignetting, we were able to define a stylistic filmic look that balances a visual drama with clear readability for players.
When we started what was to become Left 4 Dead in late 2004, or Terror Strike as it was known at the time, our team was quite small. However, we knew we had certain strengths, one of them being AI. AI is just shorthand for software that results in apparently intelligent behavior, which can take many different forms. In our case, we wanted to explore procedural content generation, creating an AI algorithm that would generate endless amounts of content for players to consume. The advantages of this are many. Not only would the game be infinitely replayable, but we could theoretically create huge amounts of game experience with a small team and some clever programming. The reason we decided on a humans versus the zombie horde motif was that the actual core game mechanic, shoot lots of zombies, is kind of a known fun quantity. That allowed us to take more risk on the side of procedurally populating our zombie world, than to experiment with a procedural system that manipulates the dramatic pacing of the game. Taking this risk has really paid off so far. Not only do we, the dev team, still enjoy playing our game after doing so for 3 years, but the procedural population system has really saved a ton of effort. For example, if we tweak some portion of how the game plays, we only have to do it in one piece of code, which then automatically populates all 20 of our maps and all future maps we or our fans create in this new way.
Local contrast adjustment is another film effect we've implemented in Left 4 Dead. We control contrast dynamically keyed to peak events in the game. When everything suddenly gets sharper, this is a visual parallel to an adrenaline rush. We use contrast to emulate a heightened sense of awareness. While players may not be consciously aware of these effects, they eventually come to associate subtle changes in visual presentation with shifts in the game's intensity.
Anyone designing a post-apocalyptic city has to deal with the problem of how to light it. Initially, our take on it was that the city still had power. You could see lights in many windows and the streetlights were all lit up. It didn't give us the atmosphere we wanted, but we felt we needed those light sources. When we started to unify the art and lighting design, one of the decisions was to eliminate a lot of lights. This gave us an opportunity to come up with other ways of bringing light into scenes. As we removed lights, we found we were also removing any sense of normality in the city. Without lit windows, or even the illuminated signage in front of stores, we removed some familiarity from the player's experience. Things are lit from lower angles than they would expect, from car headlights and oil barrel fires. These dramatic angles really enhance the sense of a creepy, desolate, almost hopeless environment. Now it's a city that you've seen, but not in a way that you've ever seen it before. Something's amiss. Something's off.
Buildings by nature tend to be pretty square, and if there's a well-lit building with a dark sky behind it, you clearly see the squareness of the building, no matter how many AC units, chimneys, or other interesting shapes are stuck on top of it. So what we did here was flip the typical lighting scheme and put a bright sky behind dark buildings. Suddenly, the pipes and chimneys blend into the building's silhouette. Now, instead of seeing individual details like the AC units, you're seeing a much more complex, organic-looking skyline in the background. And because the mind expects a similar level of detail throughout an object, your imagination fills in the detail in the dark areas of the building based on the silhouette.
Car alarms are an example of what we call panic events, brief, intense, and maybe avoidable moments. In the classic post-apocalyptic movie, car alarms go off, but there's nobody around to respond. It's just another sign of things having gone down the tubes. We initially put the car alarm cars in just as a cool effect. But when we hit on the idea of having the alarms call up a horde of infected, we knew we'd found the right use for the car alarms in the world of the game. It's really great when this kind of classic genre element can serve a gameplay purpose as well.
Early versions of Left 4 Dead allowed more skillful players to run off on their own without much fear of deadly consequences, bobbing and weaving around the infected before they could react. The addition of player slowdown, when hit by a common infected, severely reduced the player's ability to simply run straight through the horde. More importantly, the Hunter Pounce and Smoker Hang presented fatal situations for a player on his own. These additions instilled the fear of being alone in even the most seasoned of FPS players, reinforcing the value of tight teamwork.
That was good.
Through playtesting, we found that Left 4 Dead's unique cooperation mechanics were tricky even for seasoned gamers to grasp immediately. Failing because of rules that are not clear is never fun. Therefore, we designed the game instructor system to educate players as quickly as possible. Because first-time players can potentially join an in-progress game at any point, it was critical that the game instructor dynamically interpret game events. It keeps a running list of the lessons that can be taught in the current context and displays the ones that are most important. It also tracks how many times the player has successfully demonstrated that they've learned the lesson. Once the player has proven competence at any specific lesson, the hint is never shown again.
Left 4 Dead evolved some of the contextual dialogue technology that we used in the Orange Box. Each survivor has a large database of lines to choose from based on their present activity in a variety of factors, such as their health, stress level, kinds of special infected seen so far, and many others. Each line can potentially trigger an automatic response from another character, allowing rich conversations to be dynamically generated based on the player's history together in the game so far.
Another way we try and give players a new experience every time they play Left 4 Dead is that in addition to randomly placing bonus items like pain pills and pipe bombs, we vary the location of the more powerful weapons, the auto shotgun, the assault rifle, and the hunting rifle. These weapons will always appear somewhere on the main path, but there are 4 different areas in the subway station where they can spawn. This means that players can't take these positions for granted on repeated playthroughs, and must keep their eyes open for the weapon upgrades.
Although it sounds ridiculous to talk about advanced zombie AI, we spent a great deal of time on the AI systems for the common horde. First and foremost is their ability to navigate. The environments in Left 4 Dead are geometrically complex and littered with breakable and movable objects. One of the design goals for the zombie horde was that there can never be a place where a survivor can stand that a zombie cannot navigate to. To make this happen required not only robust pathfinding code, but also path-following algorithms as well. These path followers have to continuously evaluate the local geometry around them and decide whether to crouch, stand, jump, climb over, and otherwise navigate nearly arbitrary environmental obstacles.
This covered body is an example of how we tell a story in the levels without using any words or overt storytelling. We wanted to show that there are other people in the world that are survivors like you. We figured most people wouldn't survive very long and you'd come across their bodies, but we needed a way to set these apart from all the dead ragdolls of the common infected. By simply covering a body with a blanket or a sheet, it becomes really obvious that this guy had a buddy, a friend, and when he went down, his friend had compassion and covered him up. This also tells a story about the state of the world, that they wouldn't want to go out and bury the body. They couldn't expose themselves to infected. So they'd have the bodies right there with them, but covered. Sometimes you'll see a covered body right outside a checkpoint. So it's like they were in a safe area, and maybe during the night their buddy died from his wounds. So the next morning, the other survivors didn't really want the body in there with them, so they dragged it outside. This was the best they could do for the guy.
Smoking the set is a common film technique used to help separate background and foreground elements. We use particles and distance-based fog to do our own version of smoking. Our first experiments proved frustrating for players. We used a realistic dark fog, but this obscured character silhouettes and gave no sense of the vast surrounding environment. Once we lightened up the fog, the maps gained a greater sense of scale and distance, and the readability of characters greatly improved, so the players could more easily tell friend from foe. Fog also helped players spot important events, like zombies climbing over distant fences.